Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It's great to see you. You have to be honest, it's like 129 degrees in here. I have my fan going right there. I kind of repositioned myself, not so attractive, but if you can hear the fan and it is distracting and kind of prohibitive of our conversation, please let me know because then I would take it down. Why did I wear long sleeves? It's 120 degrees. Oh, it's good to see you. Happy Friday. Did you tune in earlier when I was live at Thistle Needleworks in Wethersfield, Connecticut? What a fun day. Oh my gosh. I'm going to get into content because I want to conclude our look at the um, Webb Deane Stevens Museum, also in Wethersfield, Connecticut. We started our slideshow. We only got to 2 slides this past Wednesday. I want to continue looking at that exhibit that I went to last weekend on Saturday called Digging Deeper. It was an all textile exhibit. And we got really into the conversations about the morning art and the few pieces of needlework, the samplers that we saw early on. So so I'm going to get into that content. But man, today was so much fun. I hope you caught the live stream. It was in the middle of the day, so it's entirely possible you didn't. But it will be on Ribbon Candy Hooking channel, and you'll be able to see it any time. And I went in, and Judy and her daughter Karen, who are the owners of the shop, were so gracious. It was such a lot of fun. It's like a whole new world opening up for me looking at this needlepoint stuff. I ended up getting some metallics, some of the small, because I am so used to with rug hooking, and I will always love rug hooking. It will always be my main love, without a doubt. Um, I'm so used to buying large quantities of everything or making pieces that even the small pieces are a bit larger, right? So it's such a novelty to go into a store and see, by the way, cheers, my dears, happy cocktail night. Got this much left of that crazy pineapple margarita, but then I've got a nice fresh beer that Jay just dropped off, so I'm certainly gonna partake in that. Nice and cool. Crushable India Pale Ale. Crushable. What does that mean? It means I can ingest it easily, I suppose. It was such a lot of fun. It's such a novelty to go into a store like a needlework store, right? It's like cross stitch, all kinds of embroidery, punch needle, right? These are much smaller quantities, 5 yards, 10 yards. That's kind of a high quantity for these kinds of yarns. 1 ply, 2 ply, 3 ply, very fine, very different than what I'm used to handling. And I am super excited to start working on some smaller punch needle projects. Setting up for vacation and a warm summer by the look of it, by the feel of it. And I'm just going to make sure. Okay, I'm just going to make sure no one's saying, I can't hear you. The fan is completely insane. I'm going to catch up with the thread. But I'm so excited to work on some smaller projects, and I bought some stuff for punch. I have every kind of punch needle, so I bought some stuff for that so I can get going on that. And I'm going to show you how it goes. Because for me, yes, I've used Valdani to punch. Yes, I've used the pretty punch spools, which I also love. I've used DMC by separating it out. I've done all of that, and I'm really excited to try punching with 100% wool, 1 ply. I feel like that's just a horse of a different color, something different, something new, something different. I'm very excited. I hope that you caught that. I had so much fun, and I had so much fun. I'm going to turn my light up a little bit. I had so much fun with Judy and Karen. What nice people. And as soon as you sit down with people who have been in, this is another textile business for years, right? So knowledgeable, and all kinds of stories come up and names I haven't heard before, and it's all part of our shared story. So I'm very, very interested and hearing about the different brands and the founders of the brands, and it's very exciting. So that's something I'm going to dig into more and more as the summer goes on. I see it as a bit of a side project for me this summer. Everything with Ribbon Candy Hooking stays the same, and I am finishing up the Design Like book. I wrote the Paul Clay chapter yesterday. And incidentally, if you have work, I'm going to remind you, I have a weird shadow on my face, but it's okay. I'm not growing psychedelic sideburns. I'm just sitting in the sunlight as it comes in. See if I can do this. That might be a bit better. If you have work from any of the Design Like classes that we've done, please let me know, because it might be a chapter. I don't want to sort of divulge the entire table of contents, because then I lay myself out a little bit vulnerable to people who are inspired by these ideas. So I'm keeping it under my hat. But if you have taken a class with me and you've done work that's based on it, please let me know, because it's entirely likely that I'm using it in a chapter and that I can use it for the book. And I would really love to use your work for the book. We are not having gallery night tonight because I did not announce it far enough in advance. We're having it next Friday night for cocktail night. So please be with me when we do that. And please be sending your work in the meantime to ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Robin, cheers, my dears. Good evening in Wisconsin. Red wine and rain. You can't imagine how good that sounds. I feel like I've got brain damage. It's so hot. Yes, something warm and red in a nice chilly rain sounds really good right now. Linda B, cheers. Fiber, love, and friends. Happy Friday. April, happy cocktail night from Illinois. Great to see you. Becky, happy Friday. Great to see you. Mom, cheers, my dears. Mom, I wanted to ask you, my sister Jessica just wrote and said that she's headed down on Saturday. May we come tomorrow too? The entire onslaught, is that okay? I would love to come down for Mother's Day. Let me know if that's okay. I was thinking, is it too late to come tonight after the show? It probably is, right? It probably is. These two kids, right, they are ready to go to Sigami anytime. Anytime. They have like one foot out the door into summer and the other one is on a banana peel. They are ready for some fun. Shannon, great to see you. Happy Friday. Sitting there working on your punching from the punch class the other night. I bet you're almost done. You killed it. You got a ton done. We were working on Starflower the other night, and yours was coming out so well, Shannon. Really, really, really good. Allie's was coming out great, too. Linda Ann, yours was coming out great. Linda H, happy Friday in Massachusetts. Great to see you. Pamela, happy cocktail night. You did make it. I was so glad you're there. You've had company from out of town all week and they just left. Cheers, my dears. I'm going to take that opportunity to wet my whistle. I think I got that weird shadow off my face, too. I hope my little girl Jocelyn's watching, because this pretty necklace, let me make sure that it's showing, with all these shells, this was her Christmas present to me. She picked it out at an antique store when we were away in December, but I just think it's so pretty, and I haven't really worn it yet, so I thought, I wore it today for the video, and I'm hoping she's watching, and she knows that I love it. Priscilla, good to see you. Cheers, my dears, in Akron, Ohio. Cheers, my dears. Great to see you. Happy Friday. I'm not going to drink between everyone, I swear, or I won't be able to run the show, right? Melanie, great to see you. Happy Friday, warm, sunny, Western Washington. Kirsten, happy Friday, great to see you. Only there for a moment. I'll take you. I'll take you for a moment. Great to see you. Country gal, hello everyone, and happy Friday from Wisconsin. Happy Friday to you too. Ryan, happy Friday in North Texas. Humid Friday. Oh boy. Sorry, allergies. Right? It's definitely better. I'm sure you can tell it's definitely better. But man, I was slayed by allergies. I'm gonna put my hair up because it's a bit cooler. Slayed by allergies this week. It was just awful. Happy humid Friday. I love that. Gin cocktails and grilling for dinner. That sounds fantastic. Love and peace to all. You too, you sweetheart. Great to see you. Kirsten says you caught the end. Inspired to do more dollhouse stuff. Yeah. Judy showed at the end like 3 little rugs. One of them was kind of an antique rug, and she was wondering if it was hooked. I think it was sewn, but super lovely, right? Little dollhouse thing. And then she made kind of a replica rug because it was a bit faded. You know, it was a pretty old thing, pretty and old thing. And then she made a 3rd rug with a barn on it, with a little American flag on it. Really patriotic, very summery, really charming. It was nice to see those little rugs together. It's always nice to see things. Did anybody catch at the beginning she was showing the, I'm going to say tempura, and I know that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Temora, is it something like, you know, the big ball with all of the threads on it, you know, a crazy amount of work in that. That was so exciting for me. It looked like a real museum piece. And I came across that with my friend Nancy the other day. She had, you know, she had the big tub of so many things to do, so little time, right? You always hope you have the maximum amount of time and that you get to try all of these great things. And I hope we can try them all together. It is really endless, isn't it? Pamela says, happy cocktail night. Watch the live video. Woohoo! It was so fun. I mean, I can't believe how long I stayed on. I was like 100th of the way through the store, too, and I stayed like another hour after that, going through those folders and stuff. And, you know, I'll show you another time. You know, she had some beautiful patterns from Sturbridge Village, Deerfield, Strawberry Bank, right? All of these beautiful historic hotspots around New England. Oh, patterns for old beds, bed rugs, right? Not really bedspreads, bed rugs, and samplers, right? Really, oh, new old stock. Nothing better than new old stock, right? Let me just make sure I'm caught up. Hang on, I caught the end. Melissa, great to see you. Happy Friday. Pamela, happy cocktail night. Got that. Carol, great to see you. I opened your rugs. I can't show them because they're for the design. Like, I swooned for both. Absolutely unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And you finished them beautifully. And I should have said, you don't have to finish them for me. But if you have time, you finish them beautifully. So they are ready to go and ready to be hung. And amazing. I wish I could show, I really wish I could show them. That whole project has to be a secret for a little while longer in terms of like the content. Linda Ann, happy cocktail night, everyone. I am doing really well. I hope everyone's doing really well. Shawnita Smith, good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome. Jay is on. Sounds fine. Okay, good. So the fan is not awful because I think I would just like Wizard of Oz style drip into a pool, like a puddle, if I didn't have it blowing directly on my face and throat. Sound is good. Doreen, great to see you in upstate New York. Wendy, great to see you. You love the color theory class on clay. Oh, I'm so glad. What a lot of fun, right? So much more to say about that, too. So much more to say. You were on vacation. Oh, well, I missed you, but I'm so glad that you caught it. Make sure that you are signed up, everybody, for the fairy tale class part 2. And I know it's always BOGO with the classes, so if you buy one, you get one for free. If you get the fairy tale 2 class, you automatically get the other one for free. And if you've already taken that one, then you pick a different class, like one that's pre-recorded. You get all the same material as live. It's different. It's different energy, I think, when we're live and we can talk and look at each other and hold up pictures and stuff like that. But this is the second fairy tale class, designing like the fairy tale storybook. 5 very different stories, very different sort of origins. Really, really fun. So make sure you're signed up for that because then I'm away for a little while. That and the live hook-in is coming up. We shifted the date for the live hook-in because I didn't realize it conflicted with one of the fairy tale classes. We shifted that like 2 days back. So if you signed up for that, the black sheep design, right? Do I have that behind me? I don't have that behind me. I'll remind you another time, but make sure you're signed up for that. It comes as a kit. Great opportunity. I better down this margarita. Great opportunity to hook a project from beginning to end with me. Just live hook and beginning to end. If you're a beginner and you're just starting, great opportunity, right? Because it's not an expensive kit. And the live is free. Gail, good morning in Australia. Happy coffee time to you. Good to see you. Linda Ann, I love the color theory too, Wendy. That was fun. It was fun. It was absolutely way more fun than I thought. I didn't know that it could be that fun to talk about the color wheel. It was really fun. Brenda, great to see you. Good evening. Sharon, good evening in Vancouver. Hottest day this year so far. Yeah, Linda Ann was saying that earlier. It is like punishingly hot. Country gal. Oh, yep, you're checking where you are. How was your embroidery class? That's right. If you have any photos to send, please send them. I've got some great, I've got Carol's photos to show next week of the Cream City rug event. And I've got Karen Garby just took a bunch of pictures. She's up in Canada. She just took a bunch of pictures at the Maud Lewis exhibit at the library. So we've got some interesting things coming up next week to look at together. Sure, bomb down. Ooh, don't tempt me, Mom. Well, I could really pull it together quick after here. We could be there at like 10:30 or something. Maybe that's too late. Bonnie, good to see you on Palm Coast, Florida. Diana, great to see you. Good morning in Brisbane, Australia. Great to see you. Good morning. Juliet, great to see you. Hello in Maryland, sitting on your boat, chilling. All the rugs down. Oh no, of course they're not. They're at the exhibit. They're hanging up at the gallery. They'll be back on the boat soon, right? Good to see you. You've got the good. You got the pattern today. That is the last secret thing that I'm sending out, and that is exciting. Good. I'm just checking with the thread, making sure you're all good. I know Joss bought the prettiest necklace. Let me make sure it's really showing. I really love it. Reminds me of that little girl. Jude, great to see you. Hello. You were just off to bed in the UK, but you got tempted to watch. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm going to go right into content, I swear. Can't imagine how many new colors you had to purchase. Well, you know what's crazy about that, and yes, I can't, yes. So, and more, and there will be yet more. But the thing with that is, you know, you get like the skein of what, 10, 20 yards, and it's like $6. It's very hard to say no to that because they're hand dyed, right? And they're so glossy. The luster is different on each like line. It's so seductive shopping in a store like that because I'm used to a skein of yarn at the knitting store being $38, $42, and it's like $3, $6, and it's a much smaller amount. but do I need a ton, right? Because I never use up what I've got. So really interesting. It was really shameful, but fun, really fun. All right, let's Tamari. Thank you so much, Juju. Thank you so much. Why can I not? It's too close to tempura, and I'm always thinking about food. What is wrong with me, Carol? That's a lot to learn. That needs practice, but willing to do my part. Oh yeah, I know. It is. It's something totally new. Diane, happy cocktail night. Can't wait to watch that video. Oh, it's there for you. It'll always be there. Lisa, great to see you. I still have to write to Kathleen. I haven't done that yet. Thank you so much for forwarding her info. Ryan, great to see you. Happy Friday. You're done. And now you don't know what to do. Well, somebody actually wrote and asked for a custom order because of your Baldachal tapestry, right? Swedish tapestry, right? From like the I want to say like the 12th century, something like that. Super beautiful. What considered not one of the more famous tapestries, but certainly one of the finest of like the really old tapestries. Somebody custom ordered one, so I spent a lot of time this week drawing the Baldachal tapestry, which I did, and now that's available on Ribbon Candy Hooking. So I've got to kit it with yarn. Not like you did with your vintage kit, but I'm kitting it with like the 2-ply, 3-ply. And it's a big project, but it's a lot of fun. And one of these days I'll do it myself. I'm debating if I should make more color variation in it because it has a lot of color variation. Ryan, do you remember how many colors were in your kit? I don't want to put too many, but I want there to be nuances. You know, what a beautiful piece. That will certainly be in gallery night next week. I cannot, Ryan, how many days was that? What was the tally on that? Because you were giving us the day counts. This was a massive piece. Was this like 8 feet or more like 6 feet? Or was it not that big? I mean, that was the most complicated piece I think you've done so far, am I right? All of your pieces are, but I mean, this was really a feat. Lily, great to see you. Happy Friday. Ryan, your rug looks amazing. It does. It is absolutely crazy. Lily, the fairy tale class is designed like the fairy tale storybook, and there are 5 fairy tales that we're looking at, and we'll be looking at the storyline for each one and creating multiple designs for each one. Using the sort of content that's already in the story. Oh, good. Thank you for the links. That's great for the stories. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Cheers. Southern Soil. What a great name. Great to see you. Cheers, my dears. I'm going to start on the crushable. 2 Roads, Lil Heaven. It's harder to say Lil than it is little, isn't it? When it's like shortened. Country Gal. I see my black sheep kit shipped yesterday. Yes. That'll be fun to do together. I love that pattern. If I do say so myself, I love that. Yeah, you are welcome, Ryan. That is so beautiful. Country Gal, I just finished a cross-stitch sampler today. Still have to stretch the piece and lace it up and frame it. Yep. That's not necessarily the fun part, but you know what? You are right at the home stretch. You can see the finish line. I almost said you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but that doesn't always sound like a positive thing, does it? I'm going to avoid that expression. Oh, you made it custom. Stop it. Because there was the thing on the sides of that original piece that the sides aren't present, right? So how did you do that? How did you fool with the edges? I kind of filled it in logically. That's how I fooled with it. I didn't crop it. I'm wondering how you fooled with it, because I know that was a thing. 60 plus hours, 7x4. That's impressive. That's impressive. Pamela, every time I see Ryan's tapestry, I swoon. It's so gorgeous. It really is. Lori, happy Friday to you too. Great to see you. So much to say, but I'm going to get down to content because we didn't get very far last time, and I love to have these side conversations that we always have. I'll just remind you, last Saturday was an event at the Webb Deane, why do I struggle so much with this? Webb Deane Stevens Museum, and that's in Wethersfield, Connecticut. It was a textile event, and I was very lucky that I caught it. A viewer actually sent me the link. Otherwise, there's so many things that come and go on Facebook. I'm not always tuned in. I'm not always on. Very happy that I caught it because the tour was given by Linda and Elizabeth. It was absolutely a hit out of the park, beyond a home run, a grand slam. That's baseball, right? Grand slam. It was so beautiful, and I was looking at textiles that you're about to look at that are typically not out and could go decades or more without coming out because there's only so much that you can display, right? But most house museums, this is a museum, preservation society, historic societies often have a sort of a back room, attic situation where there is much more in storage than they are able to exhibit, and it's great to have these opportunities. Jill, great to see you with your G&T. Happy weekend. Sounds great. It's so great to see these backstage things. I also belong to the organization Historic New England, and they often do at some of their houses. Not often, it's probably 4 or 6 times a year at the different houses, like the attic tour. And it's X amount of people because obviously there are insurance issues when you're climbing up into the attic, right? Up these old stairs of these old houses. But it's such a rare and opportunity and such a privilege to be able to see things that are not typically on display. So very, very exciting. Let's look together. And I'm going to keep my eye on the thread because I want to hear all the interesting things that you say. Hold on, I've got the black screen too. I'm just making sure I know where we left off. Not there, way before. Let's see. We definitely saw this slide. This is one of the two slides that we saw. I was remarking on the little riverboat on the Connecticut River in the background. And I'm not going to recap. This is the one we left off on. Remember the morning one? That I think it was Lucy Griswold. Joy, happy Friday. Great to see you, my love. Good to see you. This is the one I remarked that the maker, Lucy Griswold, sent to the framer and said, can you paint that oval? Right? Unexpected. These, because the framer never gets credit for all of that work. That's a lot of fine work. Reverse painting the glass and then painting the gold, right? It had more than one kind of stripey around it. Really looked very sort of three-dimensional. Amazing. Amazing work. I did not know that framers were this skilled that they could finish things off like that. And it makes me wonder if you could send your finished, right, in the early 1800s, 1810, 1820, if you could send your finished needlepoint to the framer with a handwritten note that said, you do the reverse painting on the glass. Make it an oval, okay? Put some stars in it, okay? If you could do that, I'm wondering if, like in that particular piece we were looking at, remember there were some watercolors in the background, a little bit of blue, a little bit of orange, either early morning or sunset time. I wonder who did that, because the person with the needle obviously isn't. It doesn't go hand in hand that you have the needle and you do the needlework and you do the paintbrush work. And I just wonder if the backing fabric. I don't know if anybody knows this. It's probably different from project to project, right, and person to person. I wonder if the person who made the needlepoint was also a painter, because that's an assumption, and that's definitely not a given, is it? So this is the next one I want to show you. Remember, they have glass on the fronts of these for obvious reasons. They are like archived in the most permanent way. So I'll make this a little bit bigger for you. This is one of the samplers that was on that first wall, the antique mauve wall. Wanted you to see the whole frame, and there is a bit of a glare that was unavoidable. These are so much fun because it's a real thing, and I think you're seeing this larger than I am. It's a real thing to pick out motifs in this. This is 1789. An 8-year-old child did this. Looks like Mary, looks like Fion, but that Firon, that isn't, it doesn't sound like a name. I think you're seeing it a lot bigger than me, so maybe you can see it better. But I look for motifs in this because I feel like at the top I'm seeing two crowns. Which is unusual, right? Because this is like post-revolution. There, Connecticut. If this is from Connecticut, Connecticut was not a loyalist state, right? Maine, you get a lot of loyalists in Maine and up north because it's closer to Canada and the beehive of British loyalists during the Revolution, but not southern New England. So that's a bit odd. But I feel like there's two crowns up there. There's a house with an unusual fence. It looks almost like a modern fence. And then a kind of, what looks like a street light, which obviously it's not for 1789, possibly some kind of, what do you think, bird cage or something? And there are more motifs that look maybe like topiaries, right? I am right in the middle of a book that I'm reading for the Design Like book on topiaries. Incredibly, that is going to fit into it, I promise. And the history of topiaries is so interesting. It does a topiary, which is like a sculptured green bush shrub, right? I think of box, right? Box is an obvious one. Yew, things like that. I'm not a gardener. I'm just thinking of the things that they said in the book, but there are quite a few things that you can shape into birds, into pyramids, into bowls, all kinds of shapes, but often just kind of stacked, right? Stacked balls and stuff like that. What great motifs they made for samplers. Odd motifs, right? Because if you're not assuming that it is a topiary, you're like, what's that pom-pom thing sticking up like that? What is that, a paper towel roll? But it's probably, in a lot of cases, going to be a topiary. I was getting bamboozled a little bit with some of the samplers we looked at because there were some really interesting patterns for grapes. I'm sure we're going to encounter that. Let me make this a little bit bigger too. This is another family history in the same room. And we've got some beautiful symbols of life, of flowers, of bows, very pristine, pretty symbols around the top frame. And then we've got willows with the kind of monument design at the bottom. So we're looking at an inner design that is obviously people who passed away, and a lot of beautiful bright decoration around the edge. It's a real contrast, this piece. I have never seen a family history done like this either. If you watch, oh Dave, great to see you. Bratwurst and cabbage, hard cider too. Cheers, my dears. Catherine, great to see you. Glad to be there. I like your stein of beer. I'm drinking beer too. Happy Friday night to both of you, to all of you. You know, remember from Wednesday when I was looking at this. Jay, if you walk by, can you turn my light on overhead? Um, there were supposedly, and I have no reason to disbelieve, two girls' school, right? Two girls' schools in Wethersfield back in the day, like 18th century, that offered handwork, right, as a specialty. And maybe that's the reason we're getting such unusual designs, right, from this immediate area. I don't know that this is the immediate area, but it's hanging up in the museum in Wethersfield. So I'm seeing a lot of local color. I love the willows too. And they look so satiny and shiny, don't they? They're so lush. They're so feathery and they're so strong, right? They bend in the wind, making them so strong. You have to bend to be strong. Otherwise, you break, right? That's why the willow is a symbol. And no matter what kind of sorrow you're dealing with, you must bend, or you will snap. So really different kind of a family tree or a family record. Really beautifully done. You can see this is like silk. This is silk on silk, I would think. Almost all of these have a silk backing. But really beautiful samplers, a subject unto itself, a subject that I'm sure we are going to explore more, through the years together. Beautiful frame here. Baby, shut up, honey. Dog is whimpering away. Again, there's a glare, and it was unavoidable. I'm like just over 5 feet, and it's, uh-oh, your mouth is in here now crying? That's not going to happen. She's a sweetheart, but man, she's a lot. She's an Australian cattle dog, and she needs attention all the time. Hang on, I'm having a technical glitch, but we can do this. Okay, there we go. I just wanted to show you this a little bit closer up. So I'm pulling it open a little bit. Another willow here. So this is going to be kind of a pastoral, right? So this is made up of all kinds of stitches. This is another one that the background was painted. And again, it makes me wonder, I don't know the backstory on this. This is a rabbit hole waiting to be jumped. Absolutely beautiful, very similar landscape to the other ones that we've seen, the few that we've seen so far. That kind of bridge, right? This would be a perfect bridge for foot traffic, for ponies, traps, maybe a stagecoach, very small bridges, right? We don't have these anymore. I don't see these anymore around Connecticut. But absolutely beautiful pastoral. We've got some sheep. We've got a girl. Looks like she's carrying her hat. Lots of different stitches here. The tree is handled very differently. The willow is handled very differently than the other trees. The other trees look like knot work to me, or possibly feather tufting. And then we've got long stitch, different crewel stitches on a house that looks like almost like a Tudor house, right? And it makes me wonder, is this an English scene or an English-inspired scene? I know, Dave, it's totally amazing that these samplers have survived. It completely defies everything. And the fact that they're framed, I don't know if they're newly framed. I suspect that they are. I don't think that you would just get something, a textile under glass that has been accumulating condensation for years and keep it that way. I think this is all very well thought out. This is a proper museum, and they are on their game. And it's amazing, right, that these have made it, because most of them were framed. And gases would have built up between the textile and the glass over 100, 200 years, right? In some cases more. So yeah, it is a marvel. But man, look at the willow tree, all the colors in it. Look at the way the grass is handled in a very graphic manner, right? We can equate this to rug hooking and say it doesn't have to be shaded, to the point of nauseum. It could be graphically, boldly picked out, more in the style of needlework. Um, I just love the style. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful piece. I think there are going to be a lot of anomalies with these needlework pieces, because a lot of people, like, when you think of people being American, right, if we're talking about the 18th or 19th century, we are talking about people who are not who are British. Some people have been here since the 17th century, but not many, right? So we are talking about people who, for the most part, are still speaking with British accents or French accents, different accents, Dutch accents, depending on where they're from. And we're looking at a population, at least around Connecticut, that is mostly English and Western European, where we're not looking at a lot of. We do see in Rhode Island like a high, like sort of Polish immigration population, different from state to state without a doubt. Connecticut was, there was a lot of English people in Connecticut, right? And there is a mix. It's still the melting pot. But at this point in history, these are British people, right? And for the most part, we're looking at samplers that came out of the late 18th century, so late 1700s, and early 18th century, 19th century, early 1800s. And we are looking at a new nation, right? We are looking at the not the settlement years anymore, not the colonial period anymore. We are looking at like the new nation, and this is a big deal. And depending on, and I'm not going to start, I can't go into this on a cocktail night because it's too big of a subject. But depending on where you are in New England, very, very different if we talk about Maine. And I love talking about the needlepoint in Maine, and I know I'm very familiar with the girls' schools that were there and the needlepoint schools that were there because of my tour guiding years. But it's very different there because the population was much more loyalist, much more British, and they weren't in such a big hurry in that part of New England to um, Americanize, right? That wouldn't be a word that they would have used yet. But in places where they fought hard, fought early, really fought to the death, Massachusetts, Connecticut, like more southern New England, there were important battles, of course, in Vermont, where the Green Mountain Boys are. Blue Mountain Boys. Who are they? But it was different, right? And in southern New England, there was a great rush during this time where we're looking at these samplers to become a nation, and there was a big push to write our own dictionary, to write our own Noah Webster, to write our own cookbooks, right? Mrs. Beeton was the British version. We started to write cookbooks in the U.S. that used corn, that used vegetables that only grow in the U.S., right? That nobody had any knowledge about, couldn't grow the same things. There was a big push to create a national identity that didn't exist at all. So it's interesting when we look at these samplers, motif to motif. Some of the samplers we are seeing, like the crowns, are a real anomaly. I would think that most people would not want to use a crown, right? Because at that time, street names were being changed from King Street, Queen Street, High Street, to Maple Street, Chestnut Street, Main Street, right? And we were getting away from all those British traditions. So it is curious to see some of the motifs that we are seeing. It brings up a lot of questions about families, family feeling, because you could feel very British and still be living in the U.S. and you could be distraught with the outcome of the war and being your own nation and thinking, what are we going to do now? Careful what you ask for, right? So this is a needlepoint that is of Mount Vernon. So this is George Washington's house. This does have some damage at the top, but it does have a lot of merit too. We are looking at compositions that are super long stitch embroidery, right? If we're looking at the grass, this is very moving, isn't it? And look at, in every way, that was like a no pun intended, but it is very moving, right? It's absolutely beautiful the way that it carries your eye, the stitches move, but it also moves your spirit, I think, because it is so incredibly beautiful and fine. The handling of the trees, right? The fineness, the breakdown of color is super, super graphic, right? And this, I hardly ever think about using needlepoint as a, Jill, great to see you in Old Town Alexandria. You still have Queen, King, Duke, Prince Streets. Oh, Mount Vernon, my neighbors. That's right. You are right there. You are right there. And it's funny, I'm not going to get started, but the whole conversation about building DC, right, and creating it on this gridded system another time. But such great history there, and it is very mixed there, isn't it? It's very mixed. I love this piece. It's a shame it's damaged, but I don't think it's taking a lot away from the piece. It's very nice that the stain is, in terms of color, very harmonious with the piece. It's a very different piece, and you are seeing colors that are quite similar from piece to piece. And why is that? Well, these are natural colors, right? For the most part, for the entire part, these are natural colors. We're seeing lots of greens, lots of browns, lots of the lighter greens, lots of the bronzy greens, right? Patinas that are taken from plants, patinas that are taken from rust, like actual rust on metal, all kinds of sources. Another different conversation. But this is another example where I don't know about this one, because Lucy Griswold for sure, it was written on the back. This one I don't know, but this could be another one. Looks exactly the same, where it maybe was sent to the framer and it was like, please paint the black oval on this for me, because that's only as far as the embroidery went, right? And perhaps with this one as well, be consistent, right? Judy, great to see you. We'll take you anytime, anytime. I love the stars on it too. What a classic motif. The year is, it looks like 1802 for this. It is initialed and it's of Mount Vernon. Absolutely beautiful piece. These are all in that first room. Another mourning piece. The harp is often used in mourning pieces. It's not one of the most common symbols. Very romantic. This is exquisitely clean. This one does not have a year. And this one is not framed with reverse glass. But you can see how, it's maybe meant to be. I mean, I would think that this one was destined to be framed, and for some reason it wasn't. Because doesn't it look like it's calling out for that black reverse painted glass? This one, it's hard to tell but I'm going to say, I'm looking at the background and thinking, does this have a hint of watercolor? I think it does. Because doesn't it look, and again, glare on the glass, it's hard because I'm very short. I think there is a whisper, a kiss of blue at the bottom at the horizon line. Doesn't that frosty, icy, cool blue go so well with these warm greens and bronzes? I'm gonna open this up a little bit more because I want to look at her face, because this is an example of the face is not embroidered, the face is pre-painted, right? You see that? Yeah, I would say that background is definitely painted, and I would think pre-painted. And it looks like there's not only embroidery stitches, it looks like she is certainly painted. Her face, her hair, her chest, her skin is painted right behind. It could be that the strings of the harp are painted, right? So this brings up a question I absolutely don't know the answer to. This has got to be pre-printed, right? Is this pre-printed, or is this something that at girls' schools they would have, I don't know, did somebody do the beginning part and then they handed it off? These are really early pieces, right? I'm just wondering where this kind of early commercial start came from. Like, who is manufacturing or creating the watercolor part to this? Because while it's signed by the embroiderer, the painting is not attributed at all. Look at the stitching on the sleeve. Isn't that exquisite? It looks to me like there are a lot of sort of daisy stitches in this. A lot of different length stitches, like crewel stitches, but also some knot work. It looks like, for me, I feel like the flowers in that, I don't know if that's like a stone thing or a basket, that looks like knot work to me, and it could be that part of it is painted. Very hard to tell. I'd have to go back and look at this really close up. These are so beautiful, April. They really are. Oh, I did another close-up of that, but I already opened that up for you to make the point that the face was pre-painted. Interesting. Now, the next thing they did was take us into a room. I'm going to make this a little bit larger too, and show us things from the collection. Those ones that we looked at were on the wall hanging. These are ones that they took out specifically for this event. Juliet loves the willow tree. How could you get that texture and hooking? Okay, let's look at that together and come up with some ideas. Let me go back to the other one, and let's enlarge the willow tree. Okay. I'm going to chime in, and if you have a great idea, please chime in too. I don't know what I'm going to come up with until we have this a little bit larger. Okay. Shush, baby. Okay, let's think on this for a second. Certainly directional hooking is going to help. Now, I just hooked that willow tree the other day, right? And I did it, it's primitive, right? So it's nothing like this. I can see you doing this with maybe hooking it with yarn, fine yarn, right? I wouldn't be thinking about getting the individual fronds, literally, like each leaf or each, piece of greenery. But I could see using very, very, very thin, Even the needlepoint shop yarn, I could see hooking with a very, very fine needlepoint yarn, even doubling it up. And many of those are satin, linen, silk, right? This is silk. And they are variegated, so they are color changing. And if you got them in these very colors in silk and you hooked with them, I think it'd be quite close, right? You could even alternate between something that was like a bronze and a celery and something that was like a very light sagey and an off-white, right? You'd have to be very, very thoughtful about color placement, but I think something that was changing color as you go would give you a really good effect. I think using needlepoint yarn to hook is the answer. And I think if you wanted it to have the high shine, then you'd be looking at silk, or you'd be looking at one of the very high luster cottons. And there were lots of those at the needlepoint store today. I think all needlepoint stores are going to have that. But I wouldn't be looking at a craft store. I don't know that I'd even be looking at a knitting store. I think for this kind of luster, I would be looking for hooking at a needlepoint store. And if I ended up picking the closest thing and it happened to be very like a one ply, then I'd be thinking about doubling it, tripling it, quadrupling it to hook with, right? So many loops at once. And that would also give you great movement. When you're pulling up more than one tiny loop at once, it could give you absolutely the right lines to this, these great sweeps, right? That's a great question. I think that would absolutely do it. Absolutely. Now I'm kind of excited to try that. Absolutely, I think that would be the closest you could get. This is a beautiful sampler, a very small one, done on linen, very faded, hard to tell what the original colors were. They were probably very bright and rosy. I don't think it was brown on brown. Mehetable, this is a very common early American name. Lots of funny names, not funny, I mean very antiquated names, right? 1822, she's aged 11 here. She's executing this piece in cross stitch. Very fine, very sweet. That's my son Teddy's age. Man, I can't see him sitting and doing anything like this. Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. Eliza Purton, what does that say? Mark Shop, Fair. Oh, it's in English. What does that say? Help me out here. 10. Oh my God, it's citing, it's the Mark, chapter 10, verse 14. Okay, because this is a biblical passage. I just had to read on a little bit. So this is a biblical passage. But when Jesus saw it, he was so much displeased. Isn't that funny how that wraps around? And said unto them, suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of God. That's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Some cute little motifs. Oh, it looks like a little dog at the bottom, doesn't it? Looks like topiary trees again. This is the era of topiary trees. Absolutely beautiful. Again on linen, very, very fine, very high shine fibers that they are sewing with. These are needle crafts. I know that we're used to using a hook or a punch, but these are needle crafts, right? This is like a sister to us, right? This is absolutely the same thing. This is Dutch. So Christina, I can't read it. I can't even read the last name. Vervoren, something like that. November 12th. That's funny because it's November. It's not like it's a different word. I'm not sure what the D is. Okay, maybe November. Interesting. I wonder, because it looks like there's a D. Doesn't matter. But it does say jaar, Jaar, and that means year in Dutch. And then it also includes the word anno, right, which is not Dutch, and it looks like it's 1813. Let's stretch this one out a little bit, because this is a European one, obviously. This is a Dutch one. This is the only Dutch one I think they had in their collection, so they made a point of noting that. Wait a minute, it's not clicking on it. Give me a second. I just want to look at some of those emblems at the top. Of course, anything with a European origin, the crests and the emblems are much more important than they are to us here, because there's such a long sort of lineage and history of using crests and emblems, not just for royal families, but for provinces, even parts of a city. Lots of different crowns being shown here. That's really interesting. I don't know enough about this. I mean, I walked the streets for the 10 plus years I lived in the Netherlands, all the little villages and stuff, as well as Amsterdam. And you do see these crests above doors. They're carved, they're sculpted, they're absolutely beautiful. You do see variations on crowns, and I don't know what the difference is. Um, I don't know a lot about the Dutch royal family. It's the House of Orange, right? Other than that, I really don't know. But absolutely beautiful piece, very colorful piece too, isn't it? Oh, one thing I do want to show you a close up of this piece. This piece has cut work, right? In between, like the little dit dots in the letter, that's cut work. This is still a very big craft in the Netherlands, right? I mean, so this is Joanna, Dutch spelling. Very, very big, doing cut work, doing red work. Cut work is when you literally sew up around the area that you plan to cut, shore it up, right, to stabilize it, and then you cut it. These are tiny examples of cut work, just, making the letters out of cut work. But you get large parts, large pieces of cut work too. It's still a very, very big craft. June says, this is fascinating, so much to learn. It didn't occur to me about phasing out the, yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing there's no recipe for coronation chicken. Nope, not at all, not at all. We went so far, we even changed spellings of things, right? We dropped the U. We changed the spelling of a lot of things using R and E reversed, right? We cut that completely. We really went out of our way to create a national identity. We didn't even want to, in the early days of settlement, use children's school books that we already had from England because they talked about kings and queens, right? And it was like that life, that culture. They didn't want that construction on life at all anymore. And there was a real push during those early years, Mother Goose, right, for people to start writing books for children that were American and did not have references to England at all. It was a real push. It was a really interesting, and it wasn't about being petty. It was about realizing, in my opinion, it was about realizing that we had no national culture at all, and it was something new, right? And it was a surprise to fight against the strongest, country and army in the world and to win. And I'm still super proud of that. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I'm super proud of that. Chokes me up when I think about it because it must have taken a lot of spirit and resolve. But there was such a push after they got what they asked for to create an identity for the future that was unique and it was ours. And it's such an interesting time in history because it's such a human instinct to want to put your stamp on something, and they were so proud to have this country be their own and not be under the rule or reach of anybody else. And yeah, to have to start up from the ground up was a huge task. This is another real beauty. So Jane E. Hill's sampler, marked in this one, the thing flapped over it a little bit, and I didn't want to touch it. Summer of 1827, age, I can't tell. Can you tell? There's a lot of loss on this one. Um, Very, very pretty though. She's executed the alphabet and she's executed the cursive letters as well. A couple of different fonts and a couple of different stitches at the top, right? A few like rows of different stitching. I see something, yet my heart unmoved remains something. So this says Glastonbury Avenue. Glastonbury is a town in Connecticut, not that far from there, right across the Connecticut River from um, Wethersfield. And actually, Judy, who I was with today, lives in Glastonbury. She mentioned that while we were chatting today. This is Glastonbury Ave, but it could be Glastonbury Ave, Glastonbury, or it could be that Glastonbury Ave runs into other towns. But that certainly sounds local to me, so that's interesting. Country Gal says, beautiful cross-stitch sampler. So much history. So much history. Oh, what did it say, Melanie? It said Christina Vanderhout. Hout. Hout. Um, Gosh, I feel like that means warm. Um, and of course, Van Der, right? Because we get that a lot, like the Rip Van Winkle story, right? Sleepy Hollow. Van Der, anything in the Sleepy Hollow, it's Van Tassel, right? Van Der means of, and then Der like of, and you're getting ready for a city or a town name, or like an estate, right? It's like of something, right? So we get a lot of Van Ders. I always think that sounds so sophisticated. This is the Eliza one again, but I wanted to show it from the side because I managed to get a picture that kind of showed the luster of the yarn. You see how shiny and pearly this fiber is still? Isn't that something? I mean, isn't that something? I was kind of sneaking in there because there was about 10 of us there, and I didn't want to be a hog, you know. People were really gathered around this textile, and I thought, I don't really need to look at a block printed textile that close up. But that's not what this is at all. This is an India import, right? Very, very old. This was sitting on the table. I'm just showing you the sides. I'm showing you the whole, because I thought, yeah, screen printed, block printed, something like that. India import, no big deal. Guess what? It's embroidered, right? This looks like it's all chain stitch, and it is, to come back here, right? It does have a seam in it. It's probably meant for a table or a bed. It's a custom piece, right? Or the material was brought back or imported, and it was made to fit something, probably a bed, right? I can't rule out a table, but probably a bed. So you are seeing a seam, and look at this stitching. This is hand stitching. This is like the epitome of a luxury item, isn't it? This is the kind of thing that you would expect Queen Elizabeth to have. Oh, Juliet, I'll see you soon. Have a great weekend. This is the kind of thing that you would expect somebody to make for, like, Queen Elizabeth the First, right? This is the kind of finery that you would expect. The hours, hundreds of hours of stitching going into this, more than one person for sure. I tried to get as close as I could, and you can see that the woven is already textured. It's a slightly textured woven, and on top of that woven is this excruciatingly, painstakingly detailed, what looks to me like chain stitch embroidery throughout. I mean, isn't this insane? I mean, it's to me, it's just bonkers. It's so beautiful. I just cannot fathom this kind of work. So when you're looking at the petals, you know, standing any distance from it, um, bursting to start anew. That's a great way to put it, Jude. I love that. I love that. Burst, absolutely bursting. Scared, right? Scared, but excited. Those things go so well together too. Look at the ombre coloring on this. Isn't this exquisite? Just the one, two, just the three shades, but it really does the job. I took a bunch of pictures of this because I thought you'd want to see them. The amount of color in this as well. We are, of course, still talking about natural dyes. Let me just take a sip. This is, I dribbled it all over my face. Classy, huh? This is the carnation, right? So the carnation is a very common flower motif and also very popular in Europe. So, you know, while we did start to also embroider and use motifs of flowers that we found here that we didn't have in Europe, um, we still are using European flowers because we are often talking about the language of flowers, right? Everybody knows about the language of flowers, how like a yellow rose means friendship, and of course a red one is love or passion. And flowers mean different things. And at that time, just like the language of fans, people knew what they meant, didn't they? Looks like punch needle. It does, Wendy. It does. It's embroidered, but it does look like punch needle. A couple of things from a distance I thought is that feather tufting is like the really early version of miniature punch. And a couple of things I thought were feather tufted, like the very textured stuff on the morning art. I thought that could be feather tufted, absolutely. But this really close up, I think, is embroidered. But it looks a lot like the channels that are made when you are punching. I mean, how thin must this fiber have been? Right? It's just insane. It's just insane. I forgot what I was talking about right before that too. Oh, the language of flowers. So I think one of the reasons that we are seeing a lot of the same flowers is because they meant something. And because they meant something, it would be special and meaningful to use. Oh, we already saw that one. The specific flower, we saw that one too. Sorry, I did a few repeats. Um, in a composition, because people would have been able to read it like a story, and not everybody was reading, right? Even girls should be reading, right, but not necessarily writing. All different levels of literacy at this point. Lisa says, tomorrow I'm visiting the National Museum of the American Coverlet in Bedford, Pennsylvania. And Lisa, can you take, like, I don't know, like 400 pictures for me, something like that? I'll definitely want to use them in a show if that's okay. And I'll be headed out there with Linda Ann, right, in August. But in the meantime, I gots to see. Melanie says, looks like Indian do not feather. Large panel embroidery. Could it be an imported piece? Yeah, that one was absolutely an imported piece. but it got me thinking about like the two ways that something could come to you, right? I'm just gonna go down the rabbit hole a little bit because I think it's so interesting. I know we've talked about this before, but we have a lot of new viewers all the time. In this state, like if we're talking about the 18th, 19th century, right? During the revolutionary years, there isn't a ton of trade, right? Because there's like embargoes in place. We are not trading with the enemy. We are not supporting business. And so people have to learn to do homespun on looms, right, at home. They have to figure out how to make fabric and to figure out how to patch and make it work, right? Because we are not importing fabric. And there were laws about, at least sorry about somebody showing off. There were a lot of laws about what legally could be made. Money couldn't, right? Because that was a way for Britain to control our financial situation and to keep us in a sort of vulnerable place financially by controlling how much money we had. Now, did people counterfeit money? Absolutely. Did almost every town, at least here in Connecticut, there's so many instances for another 100 years of making your own money, right? Like at East Haddam, right, where the Goodspeed Opera House is in Connecticut, right on the Connecticut River, there is money that's minted. I think it's in the Goodspeed name too. And if you find that, man, that's a good find, right? That would be worth a lot. But there are instances of people counterfeiting money for that reason, right? Because it was controlled on purpose. And so was fabric, right? So, they would not allow mills to open in the colonies. And did people make fabric at home? Yeah, they did. But it certainly slowed things down, right? Because we couldn't manufacture, right? It would be very visible if you opened a mill, right? There were some things you dared to do and other things you did not dare to do. And there were renegades. But this is a time when everything is, penalty of death. You're not going to fool around with people. They're going to put you up on the scaffold with all of the other jerks, on a weekend, and everybody's going to come and picnic and watch you be hung for something stupid. It's just not worth it. So people did workarounds, but fabric is one of the things that was closely controlled because that was one of the great exports of England. So fabric was a really big problem and a really big deal. So it's a little bit different, the story before and after the revolution, right, when we start to trade again. But either you would, right, if we're talking about post-revolution, like Benjamin Franklin traveling all the time, all the founding fathers traveling back and forth to Europe, bringing back a huge quantity of a fabric that they saw, because of course they are celebrities, right? Benjamin Franklin was like the celebrity of the time. Um, when he goes over and visits, whether he's in England or France, oh, let us bring you to the mill. Let me show you what we're making here. And he'll go in there like he did at the Textile Museum, right, at the Textile factory, and say, I'll take 150 yards of that. And he brings it home because everything they do, whether it's bed curtains, drapes, requires insane amounts. If you've made drapes, right, you know that that's a crazy amount of material that you need, right, for just one drape. So he was planning for that. He understood that. So you could either be traveling, and it's remarkable how many people did travel internationally, transatlantic in these days, and bring back a huge amount of something new, right? That wasn't here at all, and that was a status symbol too. So that could happen. But then in many port towns, particularly in New England, right? Because you're hitting the New England coast and coming into towns like Salem, that are wealthy towns with a lot of boats coming and going from Europe and from the Far East. And they're bringing back things on those boats that they anticipate people will want to buy, right? So this is like the early version of a buyer for like a department store, right? People go with the boat and they go, I think I have a handle on what people in this community want. Well, these are all people who are, I don't know, Dutch or Belgian or something. They're going to want some lace, right? They want some lace. They're definitely going to want some. I'm going to buy some of that and bring some of that back. And it'll probably be sold off the boat before it even hits um, um, the dock, right? Probably won't even make it into a marketplace situation because there's such a high demand for it. And people will know from town to town, right, that are arriving in a town, they will know what those people want. What do the ladies want in Salem? They want the paisley shawls. They absolutely got to have the paisley shawls, right? They're gonna wear them, and they've all got to have them. So this was understood and this was accommodated. So things were imported, but for example, if you were from a remote part of Maine and you were visiting your family in Cape Ann, right in Massachusetts, north of Boston, and she had on this beautiful paisley shawl, it might be that you don't see that garment or you don't see it in the next decade because it would mean that a peddler had to take that inventory unsold, right? Because if it's sold, there's no more inventory from the dock, from the town, make their way west or make their way from port towns to these much more remote places. And if things sold along the way, then they were gone. They were out of stock. And for that reason, in the more remote areas where you get away from that coastline and where the trade was really happening, you do get people who peddle and you do get people who try really hard to bring the good stuff inland to their communities because they know they'll be able to sell it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to carry it, right? Or to have it behind you. You probably have a horse and you're like have some conveyance behind you with your stuff in it. It doesn't make any sense if you can sell it before you travel for 16 hours. You're going to sell it, right? You're going to lighten the load. When you're saying chain stitch, you're meaning timber work. I don't know. Let's look at it again and maybe tell me. I'm just thinking, I don't know enough about embroidery to be able to say. I've heard the word and I can't define it. I'm going to open my phone though and let me look at an example of timber work. The chain stitch was said when we were standing here. So I assume that that's correct. It does look like chain stitch to me only because it has that repeat outline, like all these channels you're seeing. That is the outer edge of the chain because the left side of the chain is butted up against the row before. Let me look up timbre though, because although I've heard that word, that is not one of my go-tos. Hold on, I'm not going to take a huge detour. Let me just, it pulls up tambourine. That's not really going to help, is it? Timbre work. Let's see. Let's go down the rabbit hole together. Oh my God, look at that. A book on timbre work, $102. Oh no, it looks like that's a book I need to have. A Brief History of Timbre. Oh, Jude, you're going to send me down the rabbit hole. I love it. Oh, interesting. Okay, let me accept all the cookies. Let's see. This looks like beading. Okay, so this is timbre beading. Maybe that's different. Timbre beading is a very ancient technique with embroideries being imported as early as the 16th century. Another early reference dates back to the 18th century where it was found in Europe and from its roots in Asia. Finest examples of tambour beading. This is specifically tambour beading. Does tambour always have to be beading or can it also be stitching? I'm going to put that question out to you. And then they're showing like haute couture tambour beading. Interesting. That's from the London Embroidery School that I was just reading. What is timbre work? Timbre work is, okay, here we go. A traditional technique that utilizes a specialist tool called a tambour, and that's with a U, hook. The tool is used to quickly create a basic chain stitch and can be very versatile when applying different embellishments, such as beads, sequins, feathers. Interesting. The name comes from the French word drum. Okay, interesting. It looks like great. I'm going to be going down this rabbit hole, I'll tell you. So this is the image that I'm getting shown right out of the gate. And it does look like lace, yes, but it looks like that's the timbre work on top of it. So it looks like timbre work can be embroidery or can be a vehicle for further embellishment. And I am seeing examples. They're showing a lot of examples on lace, and they're showing a lot of examples of beading. So far, I'm not seeing any examples. I'm only looking at the first page. I'm not seeing any examples that are on anything but lace or a sheer backing, right? A sheer backing of some sort. So that's interesting. It makes me wonder because they're putting it in conjunction often. Very interesting with beading. I'm going to have to get that book on timbre. What a great thing to bring up. Thank you for that. That must be the timbre tool right there. I'm sure I'm slaughtering the word. It's probably tambour, like drum, right? Interesting. Ooh, rabbit hole. I love a good rabbit hole. I don't think that's timbre. I don't think timbre is that dense. That's a really good thing to bring up, though, right? Because now we all have something in mind that we want to research more. But it sounds like timbre work is chain stitch. So great parallel. Now, this is one of the many vignettes. I'm just going to take one more sip. This is one of the many vignettes that's present. This is in the gift store. And I just you got to love a good vignette, right? Because we're seeing like a sort of a washboard, some kind of a water bucket, a drying rack. We're seeing some embroidered textiles. We're seeing a traditional costume, right, with the cotton cloth or the lace that you cross in front for modesty. The kind of mob cap that you'd wear on top. The lace in the dress and the cuffs on the sleeves would have been removable for washing, right? And then you've got the bodice, and you can see that this garment has a petticoat underneath the bodice. It's the same color, right? So it's not real obvious. You only get really fine petticoats when you've got a lot of money, or there's a special event. But typically, the bodice is a separate garment, and it has the attached. It might or might not have an attached skirt. It can be just the bodice. It can have a skirt that is on a waistband, right? That is tied, that goes around your butt and your sides like a panier, but without the stuffing. And then your skirt, your basic skirt that you wear, is the petticoat. So the petticoat is showing. We think of the petticoat as an undergarment now, but it's not. And then you'd have your tied waist around it, and then you'd have your bodice, which weirdly was often called a waist at this time. It was your bodice, it was your top, but it was often called a waist, which is confusing because the skirt part goes around your waist. But yeah, beautiful costume. And then they've got something, looks like onion skins in the pot ready to do a dye, right? A dye bath. How interesting is that? Lisa says, I'll do my best. I'm staying, oh my God, at the Haunted Grand Midway Hotel. And oh my gosh, I'm going to have to check that out. If you get a chance, can you send me that info? Linda Ann, when you come visit, do you want to stay at the Haunted Grand Midway Hotel in Winburn? I feel like I do. I feel like I do. I missed that. That is really, really fun. Please document that for us. This is Elizabeth going up into the, I think this is the Silas Deane house. And right, there are 3 historic houses right next to each other on the main street. Well worth a visit anytime. And she took us into 2 of them where the textiles were laid out for us. So, and I just wanted to take a picture down the street. You don't get a lot of streets like this at all anymore. All of these beautiful early American houses. A little bit further down the street, you get a country store, you get some beautiful vintage shops, you got great places to eat, ice cream, the oldest seed packet company in the country, an old tavern, Wethersfield, Connecticut. Absolutely beautiful. I had to take a picture of this for you too. Is this not like, come on, this is so beautiful. Look at the amount of detail on the stairwell, right? The variety. There's 2 different kinds of. It's not banister. Come on, what word am I looking for? You know what I mean. Not spindle. Come on. It's not there. It's not there, but you know what I mean. It's beautiful. Here's Elizabeth standing in front of another textile that they took out especially for this. And it is she's got it on the table. It's a tablecloth. This is not for all events. And wait till you see close up. Crazy times. This looks like linen, right? Absolutely beautiful, very fine, kind of a handkerchief weight. I'm assuming it's linen cloth. All this embroidery, lots of fancy stitches. You almost can't see it from a distance because it's all these shades of white. Lights, whites, parchments, vanilla, cream. It's just extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. They're doing a lot with the I don't know what this is called, with the long stitches, and then the cross hatching looks like it's made with a 1-ply strand that's going across, kind of tacking it under. I don't know because I don't know a lot about embroidery, but that looks like what they got going on here. Oops, wait a minute. Sorry. Do not want to delete that slide. Hang on. It's just extraordinary. It's such high shine silk too, isn't it? You see there's a little bit of loss, but the amount that's there is just amazing. You can see the lines on that, right? You can see that that's drawn onto it. And they were filling in lines. And again, baluster. No, I think the baluster is the top railing, isn't it? Isn't that the top railing? Got their kids stuck. Maybe. Oh gosh, I'm thinking. 'Cause I mean, how many of you have had or have children had their head stuck in between those things, right? And I'm trying to think of what the word is when you scream to someone, "Help! My head is stuck in the railing." Is it the railing? Is it just the railing? And then you go and the child's head is like clearly stuck, and it's like, really, really. It's happened to everybody. Styles. This may be a regional thing too. Styles for me is a fence term, but it could well be. It could well be a regional thing. I love it when we play the word game too. It's Mad Libs. It's our Friday night version of Mad Libs. I do not know. I'm going to have to read up on embroidery. I'm getting really deep in. I want to know more about how patterns got onto backings. If this is a girls' school thing, if this is a purchased thing, if this is talented person in your family helped you out thing. This is the kind of thing that I was looking at during the whole tour this day. And obviously, when you look at this, you see the way, I mean, how would you feel standing in this room looking at all this beautiful old stuff, all of this fine furniture, textiles? It makes you feel a real specific way, right? It's a feeling. Um, but try to imagine the smell, right? It smelt like spent matches. It smelt like years of fires in the fireplace. The most exquisite, woodsy, sort of fiery, um, a little bit waxy. Nothing gross. Nothing gross about the smell. Not musty, not mothbally, not stanky and dank. Absolutely nice, dry, peaty, um, earthy smell, right? Absolutely a dream. You just want to close your eyes, but you can't because you trip over an amazing piece of. Did you see that news item? Where was it this week? It's not funny. Oh, what museum was it? Somebody tripped. Oh, thank God it wasn't one of my kids. Somebody tripped and um, broke a priceless and ancient artifact. It's not in my feed anymore. I'll have to look for it and share it with you. It came up in my feed yesterday because it was, I read a lot of art history articles, but it was, I can't remember what museum it was, but yeah, somebody tripped and knocked down like this ancient, like owl or something. It was from like, I don't want to say Egypt. It was not from this part of the world, but it was like a priceless thing. And did I do that? It's one of those, right? Oh my word. Melanie's beeswax. Yes, beeswax. Balusters are the rails on the staircase. Pamela, thank you. Juju, thank you. Pamela, you are good. You are good. See, I don't know that word. I know balustrade, baluster. Interesting. Are the rails on the stairway? Judy says beeswax. Smells like beeswax for sure. That is absolutely present. And Melanie says, and also lard. Jay. Sorry, I'm calling to him, and I don't know if he has it here. Do you have that lard lamp? Has anybody said that lately? Do you have the lard lamp?
Let me see. I might have put it up already.
Okay. If just because we're talking about early American things, he's with his antique business. He found a lamp the other day. We knew it was some kind of a lamp, and it was clear it wasn't a rush lamp because it had nothing to hold a rush. But it's obviously very primitive, and it has kind of a pendutch, two birds on it, like it looks like hammered in. Please tell me you have it.
Yeah,
Oh God, wait till you see this lard lamp.
things you don't say every day, huh?
Yeah, no things you don't say every day. This is a lard lamp, so this is going into his auction, right? Let me show you the whole thing first.
Betty lamp, they call it
A
also.
Betty lamp, yep, a Betty lamp, Betty. And you're good, Pamela. You're good. And look at the decoration on the top.
All hand punched.
All hand punched. Now, how old is this thing?
Early 1800s.
Okay.
Late 17s,
Late 17s, early 18s. And this is the thing that tripped us. Look at this patina on this thing, right? This is the thing that tripped us up, right? A couple of things. This is holding what?
The wick.
The wick, okay. And this got us, right? Because we knew it must be some kind of lighting device. There's even a little bit of wax in there still. I'm not going to touch it. But you would put lard in here. Like you would put lard in and then you would light it. Cause or whale fat, but certainly animal fat too, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Because whale fat is blubber. That's blubber, right?
Yeah.
Or not ambergris. Ambergris is different, right? That's the perfume thing.
Yeah, that's
Fat. You put fat in here, into this Betty lamp, lard lamp, and then you could pour it, right? Because there's a pouring element to it. And did the wick actually go into it? Like, did
I'm not really sure if that was a wick or it's still undetermined exactly.
Yeah, and it has this wacky thing here, right? This is a hand forged. This is all hand forged, right here. How crazy is that? See if I can bring it into focus. Just such a beautiful thing. I said keep things like this away from me because even though this is not it doesn't fall into my textile collections. You don't get to hold a lard lamp every day. It's just such a beautiful thing. And the little nail is hand forged. Isn't that something? What a beautiful design for your rug, right? You can use this. This is definitely out of copyright, without a doubt. Here, thank you.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so beautiful. Isn't that an awesome thing? And it's so fun. He's very, very knowledgeable, much more than I am with this stuff. I'm gonna toot my own horn and say quite knowledgeable, just in general about antiques, because I've always loved them and I've always chased them. But this one kind of stumped us. We knew it was a lighting thing, and we just couldn't get there with it without doing some online research. But yeah, so neat. How does it work? Um, there is actually a picture of it. We found it online. If you Google Betty lamp or lard lamp, somebody posted a blog and showed it in use. And that little well is just filled with fat, and it's just like on fire. It would have to be a really controlled thing, but you can actually look at pictures of it. And yeah, it's a very cool thing. A lot of fun. So, yeah, next time he has an early American thing, I'll show you because it's just fun. That lard lamp would fit in great with this house, right? It's the right period, it's the right kind of time. I'm going to show you some of this stuff closer up. This is a little purse. Um, yeah, I think this is a little purse that was out on the table. This is called flame stitch, right? So later we will call this Bargello, right? That very 90s, 70s, sorry, not 90s at all, very 1970s. But at this point, this kind of embroidery is called flame stitch. Absolutely exquisite. And you see this little pocketbook on the right? That's a little pocketbook. And we're going to look at that close up too. So this is a little pocketbook. Um, a little bit of it's wrapped around the edges, right? It's finished off so beautifully. It's all cloth. It's totally embroidered. Um, this was in the room as well. This is a chair cover. Um, I think that this is the back of it that we're seeing. It's been dismantled, right? So I think we're seeing the back of the embroidery. I think. Um, I don't think I have a better picture than that. I think it was as good as it got because it was kind of in the shade. This is a fire screen, just as you'd imagine, and this goes to the era of, I know you know this too, but this goes to the era of women using makeup, right? A lot of smallpox, a lot of complexion issues at this time. Women using heavy makeup, and the base for makeup was often wax, paraffin, right? And if you sat too close to the fire, as you would need to for the light, if you were doing needlework by the fire, it was like your chance, right, to get some me time. If you were too close to the fire, it could cause a real problem because it could heat up the wax too, right, and cause a real health problem, burn problem. But it would also, at best case scenario, drip and look disgusting. Warning, do not look up tambour work. I've just watched a video using gold coiled wire, this is Jude, thread being speedily attached onto fine muslin on a frame, very much like you're teaching the hook. Uh-oh. If you can, Jude, can you send me a link to that? I would love to go down that rabbit hole when it's 12:30 at night and I'm laying in bed, pretending to sleep. I would love to see that. I love these fire screens. Um, you see these a lot in antique stores, both in Europe and in the U.S. Just very, very, very fine work. And you could adjust it height-wise, depending on your height and the chair that you were sitting in. All exquisite examples. Now, what's her name? This is Silas Deane's wife. I'm going to turn off my volume for a second to blow my nose. That was epic. Sorry. If you're online and you're doing Googles on the side, Silas Deane's wife. I feel like it's another Elizabeth, but I'm not sure. Beautiful painting of her. Funny what the sort of beauty aesthetic was in those days versus now, right? It changes. Like almost every generation, it changes. Because I'm guessing she would be considered a very beautiful woman at that time, less in this time. Not a hideous horse face or anything like that, but just very different. Because the way that your portrait came out, right? It was like being a supermodel. They would try to make it very, very, very complimentary. I'm not saying she's ugly. I'm saying it's just a different ideal at that time. Beautiful damask gown, very, very fine finery. And I have to say, I also like this blown glass underneath it because it's all blown glass, right? This little sort of set of decanters and some glasses from that period. Sometimes I find in Deerfield for sure, but sometimes you find this is another fun antique thing to find. Have you ever seen the glasses at an antique store, also in England, in Europe in general, big one in Italy, that have like almost like very three-dimensional, very tactile thumbprints, like almost applicate onto the glass. They're separate blown pieces. Sometimes it's pinched, but usually they're applied, and it's like wacky because you hold it and it almost feels like a porcupine. And the reason they did that was because people drank so much because they had to because of the dangerous water situation. You didn't have to drink that much, but also fun times, um, and alcoholic times, of course. But they had like very highly textured glasses because you would easily get drunk and it could easily slip out of your hand and crash to the floor. So they made glasses that were very prickly to the touch so that if you were getting a little bit too relaxed, it wouldn't slip out of your hand very easily. You'd have to maybe have a few more drinks before that happened. But everything, on this tour was like a sight to behold. Right. As you can imagine. This is another one of these great rooms that we peeked into. I'm going to bring you closer into it. Check out the floor cloth on the ground. Right. So this is a canvas painted floor cloth, checkerboard, very, very, like checkerboard was like trompe l'oeil for the day, right? Because it's kind of copying like the palaces of Europe, the black and white marble. But this is paint on canvas. This is a very practical way of putting down a floor, and these are remarkably hard wearing. To this day, if you've ever gotten into, it was very big in the 80s and 90s, painting a floor cloth. Very, very remarkably practical. Let me show you some of the other things in this room that I thought were exciting. Okay, so Linda held open this. Did I have it? Wait a minute, let me just see. No, I'll show you the outside of this too. This is another kind of a little vanity case, right? And this could be for a man or a woman. I think this one is for a man. Would be highly decorated regardless. Lots of pretty bindings, lots of pretty colors. As pretty as possible, as ornate as possible, because why not, right? Um, Little pocket for scissors, little pocket for a knife or a file, a rasp, that kind of thing. Different tools, right? Different tools. Maybe a little patch box. This is the other side of the same item. So this is literally a pocket book. You could fold it, and a man could put this in a pocket, right? Because pockets were large. They were like large patch pockets. They were not angled pockets. It would be like a jacket pocket or an inside pocket. This is one piece, right? So very different look when you folded it over. The front and back had a very different look. Bit of a sampler effect, and even again, one more time, the inside is embroidered too, right? This is a really exquisite piece. There's a couple of these that we see on this day. This is across the way. I'm kind of jumping across the hall here because I was trying to get an open view. This is, and I have another view of this bed. This is toile, right? So this would have been imported either from France or from England, because there were toile manufacturers, not just in France, right? Toile de Jouy is a French town, and that's what we kind of think about toile being from now. But there were tons of toile manufacturers all over France and also in England. Seeing a lot of beautiful chairs here too. You see the beautiful trunk at the foot of the bed here? Let me show you more of a pan back of this. Well, this is a close-up of the toile. And if you didn't catch this conversation, I'll do it quickly in a past episode. Toile was a really big deal because it was the first time that somebody figured out that you could print fabric with a copper plate, right? So the same way that you would make an etching on paper, you could use the copper plate to print a textile, and it's toile, right? It ends up being called toile, and people minds blown, right? Because look at how the fine detail is. Compare this in your head to any woven, even the finest woven. Either it's woven or it's embroidered, but this is the first time we're seeing this kind of detail in a textile. And yet Benjamin Franklin bought a ridiculous amount of it in England and brought it home to hang, right? And it's thought that he is the first person. I'm gonna have to come back to this photo. I don't think I put the better one. I'll come back there, but I just want to show you this little curiosity. See the bed in this? I'm sorry that I didn't put a better photo of it. This is a Murphy bed of its day. It has the rope and everything. Good night, sleep tight, all of that. It would swing up and close against the wall, right? So that's why it has a small canopy, but not a huge canopy, right? Because it is a bed. So they're making it as grand as they can, but this would be good for an expected guest. This would not be like a family member, right? Unless it was a tiny house, which this house is not. But this is like an early American version of a Murphy bed. It would swing up and lock. They had tables like this too, right? That were also benches. Lots of space-saving devices. Very ingenious furniture makers in New England, right? That's one of the things that New England is known for. These very advanced early furniture makers. They had to be ingenious because there wasn't a lot of space in these early homes, and they did want a lot of furniture. They wanted to put their stuff places, and they wanted a lot of stuff. They were not minimalists. If they could afford it, they wanted more, right? Status, luxury items. Um, and this is Linda on the right with a cream-colored cardigan, and Elizabeth standing over the whole cloth quilt. I'm going to show you a close-up of that, looking at this embroidery. So she's about to show us a couple of things here. She's showing you the back of this crewel embroidery. I have one more photo of it, but this is what the back looks like. It looks like a piece of a probably, I mean, it's very Jacobean in its design. Maybe bed curtains, right? This is more of the front of it. Bed cover. It looks like bedding or possibly curtain. It is more than one layer, right? So it's probably not a quilt. It's not finished on the back. It's hard to know what this was, but it's a cropped piece of some kind of hand embroidered material and taken from a larger piece. And we're seeing that close up there. And let me just make sure. Let me just make sure I show you this. Just in the background, let your eye look at that army green whole cloth quilt, right? A whole cloth quilt means it's one cloth on top, whatever weight batting in the middle, and then piece of fabric underneath, and it is quilted together, meaning sewn together through the three layers. That's the quilting. It is quilted, it is a quilt. But it's not a patchwork quilt, it's not an applique quilt, it's a whole cloth quilt, meaning it is one piece of cloth, and the prestige is in the fineness of the stitching of the pattern. Could be a bed curtain for sure, Judy. Absolutely could be. Judy, good to see you. That's Judy, who I was with today in Wethersfield at Thistle Needleworks. Could absolutely be a bed curtain. It doesn't look, it's very bold in its color, right? And not because the other ones were faded. It does look like the kind of textile that you would expect to find in a more private room of the house. It's very ornate. It's not very neutral, is it? Which isn't to say that they didn't do a lot of sort of garish patterning and wallpapering in those days. They did, if they could. But it does strike me also as more of like a bed textile. That's that little bit of it there, and they're just fooling with the whole cloth quilt now. There's a swift in the background, which is quite exciting, I think. And there are some things that are printed, like those pillows and the bolster. Those are newer, I think. There are a lot of reproduction things and new things that give the feel of, right? This is another one of these. Let me lift this for you a little. And you see Linda's using gloves when she's showing us these pocket books, right? So they could be for money or they could be for vanity tools, little supplies, like the first one that we saw. But this is all hand stitched. And again, this would fold over and it would go into your pocket. It's a pocket book, Genesis of the Word. Now this was interesting. And by the way, behind Linda and Elizabeth, this is a reproduction textile that we're seeing, right? So this is probably a wood print textile, but it's not an original. But it gives you the right feel, right? Linda is holding up a baby garment, a baby christening garment. And it is very long, right? There is no baby who would fit in this garment. It would be an infant. But I'm going to show you closer up pictures of it. But she's holding it in such a way because the baby, right, it's draped over both arms for her. The baby would be laying right in the middle. And there would be a lot of prestige in seeing that piece of material with all of that hand embroidery flapping down, right? Almost like the same kind of principle as a wedding train, right? Luxury, right? I can afford this much material. You can look at it. And Judy says men's pocketbooks were often for papers. Absolutely, Judy. I heard that too. I've definitely heard that too. Because otherwise, where could you keep them, right? Oh, God, I just love this period in history. Absolutely for papers, because you would want them to be weatherproof, right? What a life, right? Couldn't send it over email. What a different world. This is a bit more of a close up. It is pretty symmetrical, the embroidery on this piece. This was an exquisite garment, and nobody was touching anything except for Linda and Elizabeth. This is the extent of the thing, but you can see it's very grand for a tiny infant. This is very, very grand. You're seeing grapes, you're seeing flowers on this. There was so much to see this day. I mean, it was just a question of, I'm kind of speeding through the slides. There was so much to see. It was just an absolute feast. And we were focused on textiles, but as you can imagine, it is really, let me just read Judy's comment. Um, uh, Judy says, Jude, sadly, I'm not able to do tech stuff. No problem, no problem. I'll look it up. I'm sure I'll find the same thing. My goodness, it is different. It is a different form of hooking. That is a tiny hook for the tambour. Absolutely different. I need to say good night. I know it's so late for you over there. Good night in England. Sleep tight, right? And we'll see you hopefully next week or in the meantime. Colors thinking of this whole cloth quilt. Yeah, you'll go to bed with happy dreams in your head, I hope. Judy Phillips says, I wonder how many babies were christened in that gown. You know, I'm going to say probably one, and it seems like a travesty, doesn't it? But usually one. Something like this is obviously made. I don't know that it was made for the Deane family, but it was made for a specific child. And after it was used, it probably would have been put into storage, possibly another child of the same family. But it's not like you would give something like this to a neighbor or something like that. It would be absolutely a keepsake. So a lot of this stuff is in great condition because it's really not. It's not handed down the way we're thrifty now, right? They weren't like that then. If you could afford to have this kind of finery, it was yours, right? You weren't going to lend it, and you weren't going to lend it also because it was your child that had the privilege of wearing it for the christening, and for superstition or just vanity or whatever reason, you typically wouldn't share this kind of a thing. Um, it could be, I don't know, it could be that close family member, sister, maybe, I don't know. This is the kind of thing that you don't get a lot of documentation on. Uh, some women kept diaries. You would need the time and the literacy level to be able to, but most women did not. And in part, it was a time thing, but in large part, it was also that people felt like, what do I have to say that's so interesting, right? Not thinking about history as a larger picture. And I've been writing in my diary. I've taken a few times off when I've been super depressed, right? Not many. I've been keeping a diary since I was like a young teenager, with very few exceptions. A few months here, a few months there, really bad months, but for the most part, it's there. And I don't even know why I keep it. Partly sanity, and I just think you never know. Some. I don't know if I want my kids to read everything that's in the diary, but I definitely don't. But I guess in some regard, it's like the urge to record, what you do. But I think that's a modern idea, right? Because back in the day, they would not be thinking, who's going to want to read about my daily life in the future? Who's going to want to be studying uh, my record of lighting the lard lamp, right? It just wasn't done. We have not nearly enough. It's more letter writing that's helpful than more than diary writing. And who would keep a diary, right? Unless you find it hidden in a wall or in an attic or something like that. There's not a lot of that from this period, right? From the early American period. Judy Phillips says, I was thinking multiple generations. Absolutely, could be multiple generations. Could be, absolutely. Of course, the styles will change too. Um, yeah, that's something else that I would love to research. And I do have a degree in costume. This didn't come up with my degree, right? Because it was like stage costume. So we didn't really talk about this stuff. But this is probably documented, recorded somewhere. But I do think it's probably in apples and oranges from family to family and neighborhood to neighborhood. There's even different rules nowadays between state to state, right? The kinds of um, ideas about like, you know, my daughter wore these shoes, but only a couple times because she didn't like them, and she doesn't like to lace or whatever. Do you want them? For one family that would be like, I don't need your charity, but for another family it would be like, yes, please. The last thing I need to do is take a ride to Skechers, right? So it's so different now, and I think it probably was quite different then. I would love to research that more. Um, there's a Netflix show called Mortified where people, are you kidding me? Read their teenage diaries on stage. Whoa. Oh, that I would never. I mean, I can't. I'm sure I was writing about Duran Duran. I think I also wrote. I mean, I wasn't doing anything bad when I was a teenager. I'm telling you, I was the latest bloomer ever. I was not even drinking, right? I thought I'd get brain damage and drop dead on the spot. I was a little bit later, but I mean, God, please, smoking, drugs. Oh my God, the nuns did their job well. I thought you just dropped dead when you did anything naughty, but I would still not want to read my diary on stage. But you know what? I think I have to tune into that show all the same. Mortified. That is just, yeah. I guess you set yourself up for that kind of heartbreak if you sign up for that show. Oh, that's awful. Now, this is what looks like a very basic. Okay, this looks like kind of like a half moon shape, right? Maybe this is for a table, a vanity table, probably a vanity table, because it's flat on one side, right? Most people had well, if you could afford to sit to make yourself up, you would have a vanity table. I had a vanity table growing up. I had all my makeup in the drawers, all the Wet and Wild, in the little drawers. I like to sit there and talk to myself in the mirror, as I think girls do at that age. But this is just a beautiful textile, very plain. Little bit of trapunto here, right? Trapunto is when you put more than one cloth together. All you need is two, and you cut from the back, and you either insert stuffing, piping, cording, something to give it a three-dimensional effect, right? And then you always display it on the correct side because otherwise you can see where you've done the cutting. Pamela likes that too, on the other side. So beautiful trapunto piece for, I'm sure that this is for a vanity. And you can see it's very high relief too. Very plain. It doesn't mean it was plain back in the day, but maybe having a nice ivory cloth on your vanity was desirable. Sorry for the shakiness of this picture. It was the only one I've got. I didn't realize it was shaky when I took it. Here's another whole cloth quilt, but this is very highly polished cotton, right? So it has like the sheen of chintz, but it is obviously solid. And this is whole cloth. This is not trapunto. This is whole cloth, but so much of it, you see this effect with petticoats a lot too. So much of it has been quilted, right? That the parts that aren't really heavily quilted look like trapunto because of the contrast. So this is a beautiful dark, dark, dark indigo natural dyed um, polished cotton cloth bedspread that is a whole cloth quilt. I thought this was just so crisp and really beautiful. This is a little embroidered. This is a bit shaky too. It was tiny, and I was taking it from a ways away. Baby's bonnet. What am I trying to say? What is a little baby's cap called? Is it called a bonnet? I guess it's called a bonnet, baby's bonnet. I feel like it has a different word. Really beautiful, golden, lots of embroidery again. Probably did not get a lot of use, right? Baby outgrows this pretty quickly. Baby's not in this all the time. Oh, quick, the neighbor's coming. Put the hat on baby. What? Hat on baby. Can you imagine the franticness in the house when the neighbor's coming? Baby's not wearing like all of the finery, right? So much beautiful lace too. It looks like this isn't lace, this is tulle, right? The material called tulle. And they have like a scrunched up ball in there. It's tiny. Look at how tiny it is in Linda's hands. It's absolutely miniature, almost doll size. This would be for an infant. Cap, bonnet. And here's Linda. She's got a petticoat. And this would be not the petticoat that would show. Oh, you're zooming with Ted. Oh, how funny, Mom. See if he wants to go tonight or tomorrow. Ask him, and I'll work accordingly. Even if it's late, we could, or we can go first thing in the morning. Linda's got a petticoat. This is not a petticoat that you would show, right? This is not an item that you would want to show. This is underpants, essentially. This would go under the petticoat like the petticoat on the bed. So to give it body and volume, right? Because also you would not want to see the shape of someone's body, right? If you were from a lower class, you didn't have a lot of quilted stuff, right? You would just have lots of layers. Seeing someone's body, we just didn't do that until we hit the Empire period, and then you really saw someone's body and all of their cleavage too. But you know how the pendulum swings on fashion? It did then as it does now. This is the outer garment. This is the petticoat. You would have the skirt on around it, tied around your waist with the sides like a U shape, back and sides, but the front would be wide open. And you could wear a different petticoat under, if you wanted to. Contrast of color, some of them are more or less embellished. This is a whole cloth quilt on top, right? So it is quilted on top for warmth, and it is lined with 100% wool. So this would be very good for the winter. This would be very warm even now. You would have this on as your petticoat under the front of your garment. Um, and I think this is repro bedding as well. They have a record, I think, of from what I remember, of what was supposed to be in the different rooms and what kind of bird, for example, was supposed to be on the textile that made up the bed curtains for the specific room. And when they could find it or find a reproduction, cradle, um, could be cradle cap. I'm thinking of cradle cap as that thing that babies get when their head is all scabby, but it could be that it's both a condition and a garment. I'm not sure, because Joss, she's gonna love this years from now. She had a cradle cap like crazy. She was like one giant scab bag, right? She was just the scabbiest child. She's the prettiest little girl in the world even then, but yeah, she had cradle cap bad. It was like she was molting. I better stop, right? So I'm not sure. It could be that you would also say that, but I think cradle cap, the skin condition, extreme dry skin on their little head, right? I think that's an old one too, so I'm not sure. I think that's an old saying. This is really beautiful. You can see there's flowers, maybe grapes at the bottom of this. It's got a diamond quilting design on the top of it. But they were saying that when they found textiles that matched the description of what the thing, look where we are, what the thing was supposed to be looking like for the specific room, they snapped them up, right? Because they're going for authenticity. They don't have the original items. And in most cases, the original items do not exist. So the best thing that these are not items that belong to the house. They're items that belong to the period, right? And most of them are authentic, but sometimes they have to make the decision in historic museums. Should we go with a period appropriate textile as the bed curtains, or should we go for a textile that's a repro that looks like the exact one that's described as belonging to the inventory of this house? I mean, I'm a purist, but I would still go for B, because I want to walk into that house and see it as close to the way that Silas Deane saw it as possible. To me, that's the most meaningful. This is one of the hooked rugs that was there. I got very excited when I saw this on the hearth. And they did reiterate what the research that we did a couple years ago, out of like a survey of, not mine, this was from a previous Coffee Time episode on hearth rugs. It's called Hearth Rugs if you want to rewatch it. Out of a survey that somebody did of hundreds of hearth rugs, they only found one or two examples of rugs that had any trace of fire embers on them. So the idea that a hearth rug was put in front of a hearth to catch embers to protect the wood floor is now considered not realistic. And hearth rugs were put in front of the fireplace, and that's what they said on this tour too, only when the fire was not going, and in seasons when the fire was not going. Decorative, right? You might put flowers into the hearth, but you weren't going to light a fire, right? So this was a hearth rug that was in front of the fireplace. It was in a downstairs room, and typically you would not have geometrics in a downstairs room. You would have florals and fancier patterns. Of course, if you didn't have any rugs that were florals or fancier patterns, then you would put what you had, right? Or if you didn't know the rule because you were in a more provincial region, then you would put what you had. But traditionally and historically, if we've got more than one rug, if we've got a house full of people that are making sewn rugs or hooked rugs, the geometrics typically go into bedrooms and into the kitchen, because the fancier motifs would go into places where company might see them, right? It's a question of showing off. So this is the placement of this one in front of the hearth, right next to a woven rug. Absolutely, I just wanted to show you its kind of situation in the room. That's a little bit out of focus. Sorry about that. I had my glasses on, but they were my medium distance glasses because I was trying to look at people's faces too. This is the next room over. I think I might have more of that rug coming up later. So this is one room over, and this is a wall-to-wall carpet. This would have been bought as fabric with the intent. It's woven, imported, and as soon as mills popped up in the U.S., they made carpets. Right? This could be imported. I shouldn't say imported because I don't know the date of this textile. I'm not even sure if it's a repro or if it's an original textile, but you would routinely find, if you could afford a carpet for the floor, You would get the textile and the right amount, just like now, and it would be made to fit your floor. Um, or you would make it or cut it. Somebody would, right? It would be figured out so that it absolutely fit your floor. But this is a woven, and this is one of, um, and it was sewn. You see that black stitching on it? It was sewn because it was only as wide as the loom was wide. It could be that this was home manufactured because I'm looking at those two seams and thinking, that's not very wide, right? That's my foot right there. That's not very wide. So it could be that somebody, although it's hard to imagine like the little woman at home looming this, isn't it? I mean, this is a vast piece of material. It's hard to imagine that, actually. Um, I don't know. I would say just first blush that this is probably manufactured at a mill, possibly an import, and then it's sewn together to make a larger cloth, and it was made to fit the room. Kind of a predecessor to the hook drugs because these um, textile fabric carpets predate the earliest hook drugs, like the 1860s period that we're seeing the first examples of hook drugs. They can predate them, and they go right through the period of hook drugs too. So hard to tell, but it could be an earlier textile than the hook drug. This is a very pretty floral hook drug, very pretty border. This is again right on the hearth next to a nice wooden bucket. This is the kind of bucket that you'd want if there was a fire or something, right? You'd want to pour water right over it. Absolutely beautiful rug. Um, I don't know the age for this rug. It could well be a 19th century rug. Very hard to tell by condition. Very hard to tell when it's a floral, right? Because florals have gone back many years. If we were looking at something more specific, it would give us a more sort of finite clue. So very hard to tell. No reason to think that this is not a 19th century rug. This was a yarn rug, all done in yarn. Um, Certainly looks Victorian era, right? There is a real push to execute the roses in a way that is a little more realistic. Lots of browns in the background. Look like it's immediately coming from a sheep, right? These shades of brown. Um, if you could get brown from a brown sheep, absolutely no reason that you need to dye it, but the other colors are dyed probably from different berries and plants and, wide variety of things that will make the color red and the color pink. It's a lot of color in this. It is really striking. Try to get some close-ups of it. Different yarns, right? Some of them look wool, others absolutely don't. Tried to get as close as I could. I didn't want to be ridiculous either, and I didn't want to look like I was up to no good, you know. Um, yeah, this is a tough one because it's very flossy looking. Let me just take a sip. It's very flossy looking. I'm going to turn the mic off one more time, one more blow. I like the clusters of the flowers here too. Real hard to tell. Absolutely yarn. It looks closer to embroidery yarn than it does to me. It's definitely not wool, right? That's definitely not wool. Interesting though. So that kills the idea that that's straight from a sheep. That's got to be colored, right? This could be like black chestnut or something like that. If it's a local rug, we also don't know that. So no sort of information on this. It's just appropriate to put a rug of this age, right? Assuming that it is a 19th century rug down. It's not the right age for the house, right? Let's make that point very clear. It's not the right age for the house, but it's a lovely thing to have. It's a lovely representation of 19th century New England. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. See some pretty andirons there too. Let me pull this a little bit larger because this looks like a good quality for us. We're looking at the back of the rug here. The tape on the edge of the rug is not going to give us any clue because we know that the tape was done. It looks like modern twill, right, that you would use to finish a rug. It looks like modern twill or duck. It looks like modern material, but we know that these tapes were made on tape looms, right? And we know that tape looms go back hundreds of years. And you would weave, kind of braid a tiny flat cottony ribbon that you would use for this very purpose, to edge the bottom of a petticoat, to edge the back of a rug, to edge the side of something, to draw it back and sew it down and hide the edges, right? So that looks like a modern tape, but It's not. That doesn't help much at all. I am seeing some very thin pieces here. I'm gonna make this a little bit larger too. I really haven't scrutinized these pictures because I haven't had time yet. Interesting. This is absolutely all yarn. Really interesting. Really interesting. It does have a bit of a sheen to it too. We are seeing the back. I am seeing the burlap sacking that was used as the foundation fabric. Very interesting, isn't it? You know what I'm wondering? I'm wondering if it was hooked or sewn. Just looking at how close, this is the back. I'm looking at how close, I'm going to use the word stitches as a placeholder. I'm looking at how close the stitches are to each other. I'm not seeing really any gaps in between. And I'm wondering if this is sewn. I'm kind of leaning toward that at this point because, I mean, it's not impossible, but this would be a very packed rug, wouldn't it? If this was hooked, this would be very, very packed. It's almost overlapping. It looks more like a sewn textile in the back. And if there's a pile on the front, right, we were talking about this at Judy's today, it does have a pile on the front. Let me come back to the first one. You know, they used a tool that was like a little chopstick, and they would pull up a stitch with a needle, pull it back down, multiple stitches at once, not one at a time. That would be excruciating, right? Multiple stitches at once over this little stick just to get an even pile on the surface. And then they'd pull the stick out and move to the next row. So you know what's going to be a clue for us. I'm figuring this out while we're looking. I'm seeing if I can see sequences of several stitches at once. And I feel like I am seeing that in some places. Over on the left in the dark brown between the 4 yellow petals, I feel like I'm seeing rows. On the white too, I feel like I'm seeing rows. It's hard to do many stitches at once with a rounded area like the petals and the leaves. But man, I feel like I'm seeing rows. And this does not look like the back of a hooked rug to me, because we are not seeing the kind of concentric or echo hooking that we would see in a background fill on a hooked rug. I'm really feeling strongly. I'm looking at the center of that white flower too. I'm really feeling strongly that this is a sewn rug, not a hooked rug. And of course, sewn rugs predate hooked rugs. So interesting conversations that we have, right? Sewn rugs absolutely predate hooked rugs, and that's why it was so hard for so long to put a year on the sort of very beginnings of using a hook instead of a needle. And again, who cares, right? I mean, I kind of do care, I have to admit. Whether you're making it with a needle or a hook, at the end of the day, it doesn't make a huge difference. But they are two different things, aren't they? And it's important to be able to recognize them. To me, and your opinion counts too, that looked sewn on the back. That does not look like the back of any hooked rug I've ever seen. Even a yarn rug that would be crowded. I did not see any of the breakdown of channels, and it did not look packed on the front, right? Because when it's packed, the way it looks on the back, very, very well covered, even crossing over, right? That's much more of a needle thing than a hooked thing. I would bet, if I was a betting woman, I would bet that that was a sewn rug. I'd have to look at it again. This is the rug we saw earlier. I just maybe got some more pictures of it. It would have been sewn on burlap. Could have been sewn on linen. I think it was burlap though. Let's go back and check. Burlap was Hessian, right? And that was an import. So, yeah, they absolutely would sew on burlap too. Trying to find a little bit of a glimpse of the backing fabric. Let me scooch back a little bit because that was a bit. My heart's beating a little bit there. That got me going just a little bit. Trying to find an example of backing. Not seeing a ton of backing in this one. I felt like maybe it was on the first rug. I felt like we peaked at backing. Let me stretch this guy. Let me see if we can, and you shout out if you see backing. And you know, that's further proof in my mind. We are not seeing any backing. But you know what? I'm seeing a little bit, right? I'm going to move the thing up top. Look on the top left. I see a little bit of burlap on the top left. If it's hard to see backing at all, the chance that it's a sewn rug is much higher, right? Because there's many more stitches with sewing. With hooking, we're just getting the back of each loop, and we're getting much more color. When you flip it over, right, with a hooked rug, the back looks very different than the front because there's less color on the back, typically. With this one, it's pretty interchangeable. There's pretty even coverage on the front and back, which makes me think it's a needle pulling it through. And that the pile in the front is a little bit higher than on the back, but it's not that high. I'm still gunning for, I still think it's a sewn piece, but it is on burlap. And burlap was an Indian import until we were making burlap here. So that's consistent with any era of rug. Well, any 18th century era, earlier than hooked, right? Still consistent with earlier than hooked. Sorry, I'm struggling. Oh boy, here we go. Hang on. No problems here. We're good. Nothing to see here, folks. Streamlabs is giving me a run for the money. That's all. And let's look at the back of the other one. Veronica said, I wonder if it's sewn also. It looks nice. It does look nice. It's a fun exercise for us as we learn more, as we together become more knowledgeable about, technique. This is obviously a hooked rug in the back, right? You can see the directional hooking on this. It's not a question of technique, right? The person who made the other rug was very skilled. Those roses were absolutely excellent. This is a much more basic rug. But you can see on the back, do people still sew rugs, Melissa? I don't know. I don't know. It would not be in the top, 50 ways to make a rug that were quick. So I don't know. I don't know anything about dollhouse stuff or miniature stuff. I know that it's big money and there's a big market for it. I feel like if there were, just a guess, I feel like if there were people who were sewing rugs, it would be dollhouse people, because you do occasionally get a miniature hooked rug, but it's not very often, is it? Because to work that fine, it's almost impossible. If you want a lot of detail, you're going to have to sew it. And you do see a lot of contemporary sewn and Judy knotted rugs, right? But yeah, I don't know. It would be so labor intensive. I think that's part of the reason the hooked rug really took off, was because sewing a rug and holding that little thing under, right, and sewing the loops around, right? You were doing it from the top. You weren't doing it from around. You were doing it from the top, but it's tricky. It was probably super fussy, labor intensive, time consuming, fiddly. It was probably super fiddly to do it with this technique, because it had some pile. It was a very low pile, but it had some pile. Of course, you don't have to insert the stick to do a sewn rug, right? And it would be very hard to tell at this point with a rug like that if they had used that. The stick has a tool, and I just can't think of what the name of the tool is. It'd be hard to tell. Sometimes with higher pile rugs that are absolutely perfect and barely used, they're so perfect that you think they must have used that stick. But with this rug, color-wise, and the fact that it has been well used, trampled upon, it'd be very hard to tell. Oh my gosh, we're getting so late. That was a bit of a detour, right? That got us. I might actually finish this on Monday. Isn't that insane? But you can see the difference between the back of this rug, right? This is strips, right? It's probably not wool. It might be some wool. Probably a lot of cotton in here. We aren't seeing synthetics until the beginning of the 20th century. Early, but still, this is this is a 19th century rug, I would say. So this is probably mostly cottons or mixes, right? But this clearly is a hooked rug, and you can tell by looking at the backs of those loops. You can also tell between looking at the back of the rug and the front of the rug. It's very different, isn't it? It's a very different effect, not just fading in color-wise. This is probably the same kind of pile as the first rug we saw, but the back looks completely different. It's a different technique. I really think we're onto something here. Further close up, and we are seeing the burlap around the edges here. But you see how, as slight as it is, you can see definition and a tiny bit of space between rows of hooking. And with sewing, you really don't need that. Hooking with yarn is its own animal too, of course, and that other piece was hooked with yarn. So I won't be able to be 100%. I'll never be able to be 100%. But the way that the stitch is crossed in the back, I'm pretty sure. Dollhouses. I'm going to whiz through these because it's late. Let me see how many more slides we've got. I think I'm going to whiz through, just so we can start a new subject. Let's whiz through. I'll be on for another 7 minutes. Few more. This is in the upstairs hall. Wethersfield. Sorry, September 1903. Another beautiful family record. This is a list of people framed, wallpapered in upstairs hall. Another beautiful sampler. Another beautiful frame sampler upstairs. That look at the motif on the bottom. This is great. My friend Heidi, I made a friend called Heidi there that day. She was very up on the samplers. And I said, "What are those weird things? What is that? Like, what are those triangle things hanging down? It looks like a light fixture. Ding dong." And she's like, "It's grapes." And I'm like, "Oh my God, of course it's grapes, right?" But I didn't get that right out of the gate. That was a bit of a mystery for me. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you. I'm dying in here. This is an extraordinary piece, isn't it? This has got like a very ghostly figure of a girl, a tree. Look at the stumpy quality of this tree. It looks like a Cuban cigar. But the leaves are executed really well. We've got a bird on the left and maybe a sheep on the right. I'm going to take the time to stretch this out because I just want to look at this together a little bit more. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. Isn't that gorgeous? Little house in the background. Beautiful piece. A lot of loss, but still a ghostly beauty to it. Another, and you can look at these slower later, of course. Polly Coleman H10. Polly Coleman, come on, this is so beautiful. Very high luster threads again. Beautiful scene here on horseback. She probably liked animals. Looks like there's a couple over on the left, possibly marrying. Looks like there's a house or hall of some sort in between the two skinny trees. She's trying out different kinds of trees. She probably wanted to get the animal in there, get some flowers in there. Girl on yonder, we're probably missing the beginning of the text. A girl on yonder flower and see the busy fly, made for the enjoyment of an hour and only born to die. Oh, that's depressing enough, but really, really lovely. Of course, talking about mortality was something that was very commonplace at this time, right? Whenever God took you is when He took you, and you better be ready for it, right? Let me stretch this out. I wanted you to just see the orientation of this and the framing on this. All of the some colors faded. That's all it is. It's not complete loss. The colors have faded. Depending on the dye, these are all natural dyes and they are well faded. But I just wanted to show you the bottom of that because I thought this boxed-in garden, very formal garden, it's really, really, really beautiful. Early 19th century house. Really beautiful. Let me whiz through the rest of this. Oh, so trundle bed. Look at the wallpaper in this room. What is this, sawtooth pattern, the quilt? Is that a sawtooth pattern? And the trundle had the tumbling blocks pattern. I think I have a close-up of that. So, maybe mom or sister or a couple sleep on the bed and child sleeps on the trundle bed. Space saving. You can see the ropes that pulled to the mattress, right? You tighten them at night with a peg. Good night, sleep tight, tighten the bed so that you didn't fall right down to the floor because it was so saggy. Had to show you this, right? Had to show you this wallpaper. Certainly repro, the co-sleeper, that's it. I still co-sleep with my guys. I love it. Until they don't want to anymore and they're not so scared all the time. Love it. I just love it. And my mom has a trundle at her place, which is a lot of fun. Really practical. Love the wallpaper. These are reproductions, but I'm sure they've got good information to steer them toward these designs. Beautiful quilts, right? This is probably a baby's bed, not a doll's bed. It would be too much room to take up for a doll's bed, right? Unless it was a very wealthy house, which it was, but they're showing us a Murphy bed and a trundle bed, so there is an effort to do some space saving. This is the hallway I just came from. Beautiful examples of hat boxes covered with wallpaper. This is the next thing I really want to collect. I don't have the wallet for it at this moment, but I absolutely love it. And I'm whizzing through. Beautiful clock. You can come back to the slideshow and pause on them later if you're seeing things that give you great inspiration. Beautiful bed. This is reproductive cloth, but this is another example where they had a description of the bed covering, the bed canopy in this room, and it was almost exactly like this. So they ordered this because it made a lot of sense, to have this matching the description. Now, beautiful bed, lots of textiles. That's overshot, right, on the bed, the blue and white piece, hooked rug on the right. And this is the room where I went in and I could tell by looking at the floor that this rug was upside down. Because you can just tell, right? You can just tell even from this distance. So I went over to it and I said, did you put, when you get right upon it, that's a hooked rug, right? You see the little gaps in between the lines of hooking and you see the serious directional hooking that this person did, right? Really intent on getting it directionally hooked for more added interest. And Elizabeth flipped the rug over, and so this is another close up. Beautiful rows, very fine rows of stitching. And oh yeah, it was much lighter on the other side. So the other side had a much higher pile, and that's the correct side. But it is stunning little morning dress, Pamela. It was. I might have another photo of that. Beautiful geometric pattern upstairs in a bedroom. That's just where a geometric pattern would be. Isn't that gorgeous? Even the faded side is really gorgeous. There we go. Beautiful little morning dress on this gorgeous overshot. What a vignette. Oh, I'm telling you. I just can't get enough. Oh, and then I went outside, and beautiful gardens outside. They do have, check out the website for um, the Webb Deane Stevens Museum in Wethersfield, Connecticut, if you're local. They do have a garden day coming up, and I think it involves some other properties. So, what a lot of fun, right? And this is that barn I told you about that's out back. And I sent a message to, I think, Cynthia there. And I said, I'd love more information on this barn. I'd love to do classes in here. I'd love to get together and have a few teachers, maybe over the course of a few days, kind of a retreat situation. What a great town to park and do a couple of classes in a day, maybe a talk. I don't know in terms of seasons, if it's meant for cooler seasons, but it's also a beautiful town in the autumn when they've got all their scarecrows lining the main street. This is on the main street. So I'm waiting for more information on that as well, to be continued. So if that's something that we can use, I'd love to plan some classes in there. That could be a lot of fun. We could do a nice workshop, do a nice talk in there. Could be a lot of fun. Something to plan for the future, so you could plan for that too. I'm late, so I'm going to log off. I'm going to see what the game plan is on this Mother's Day weekend. Happy Mother's Day to you. Whether you have babes or not, you've had a mother, right? You've definitely had a mother, so you can celebrate in some way. Just remembering your mother, celebrating your mother, visiting with your mother, whatever the situation is. I wish you a very happy Mother's Day. And what a great gallery night, not gallery night, what a great cocktail night. It was great being with you. Judy, if you're still on, it was great being with you today, and Karen. It was great being with all of you who tuned in when I was live earlier today at Thistle Needleworks, also in Wethersfield. Have a great weekend, everybody. Judy says, the meal's across the street at Lucky Lou's. I've been there. I've been there. That's the tavern. Jay and I went there. We really liked it. I liked it before when it was even like had the older feeling, but I still like it. There's live music outside, super fun. Thumbs up, like, subscribe. For those of you that are Patreon members, thank you so much for supporting me as a brand, as a channel, all of these shows. I will be back with you on Monday for coffee time at noon Eastern Standard Time. I thought I knocked the water over. And we will be, I forget what we're doing. I know I need to look at Carol's images for the Cream City rug show. We didn't finish Kathleen's book either. We'll do something amazing on Monday, Wednesday, and again next Friday night is gallery night. So be sending me your work so I can start putting that show together. Be sending it. Jane will let you know if we need any more information. It used to be the Standish House. I think I remember that from years ago. It was a little bit more, that tavern that Judy's talking about was a little more authentic in terms of looking early American. And yeah, the more the better for me. It can never be enough. Happy weekend, everybody. I love that barn too. Um, Lots of to be continueds here. Tell me what you find over the weekend. Visit our Facebook group if you're on Facebook, Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. Check out Ribbon Candy Hooking. I could sure use some orders. This is the quiet time of year. I could sure use some orders. That's for sure. Get on there and order some good stuff. Classes coming up, new products out, all kinds of stuff at Ribbon Candy Hooking. Let me know what you're looking for. I will see you